Welcome. It is great to be in Columbia today. You guys, as you said, no stranger to my face. I'm happy to always come and be a part of your community events or be a part of any of those special events, and certainly welcome the opportunity to just join in with you and not be the speaker. So if you have some of those that you would like to invite me to, I'd be happy to, and you don't need to invite me to be the speaker. So. First of all, as Missouri's Public Safety Director, I want to start off by giving a shout out to the Columbia Fire Department. Some of you probably saw in the news the last, was it 2 weeks ago, that they became one of 7 fire departments in the state of Missouri to become accredited by the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. So congratulations and thank you guys. It's nice to be accredited, but it's also nice to know what that accreditation means. And less than 1% of the fire departments in the United States are accredited through this body. And so what does that accreditation mean? It means there's been a lot of hard work, a lot of probably focus groups, a lot of meetings that have occurred, a lot of policy changes, a lot of things that have been reviewed to make sure that you are performing with the best practices for the city of Columbia. And so I'm very proud, and I do want to say congratulations. So I was involved many years ago as a trooper with accreditation when the patrol went through the process. And I will tell you, as a road trooper, I didn't fully understand it. We got a crowbar and got some orange traffic cones. And I thought, wow, that's great. That's what accreditation means. And as a road trooper, you know, that was what I got. That's what I saw out of it. I also saw a lot of policies that were changed, a lot of policies that were updated on a regular basis. And as I rose through the ranks, I saw and had a deeper appreciation for accreditation and the work that goes into it and what it does for the agency. And so it gives you a stamp of approval that what you're doing is recognized as best practices. And it is important to the training of your folks. It's important to the community, and it's important to you as a department. So I'm very happy to give you that shout out. So I wanted to take a few minutes, and I think he mentioned it, that the Department of Public Safety is comprised of several different components within state government. We are one of the largest departments. We are one of the most diverse departments. And what I mean by diversity is we are diverse in what we do. In any single day, a teammate from the Department of Public Safety could be removing a drunk driver from the highways. They could be responding to floods or seeking resources in response to floods. It's been that way for the last couple of weeks up in the northwest part of the state, and as the water is moving across the state, we're now providing resources in the Carroll County, Ray County area, as well as preparing for the crest that's going to be seen on the east side of the state near Kinswood, Missouri. And so we have the State Emergency Management Agency that's involved in that. But also, we have folks who issue or may be involved in the revocation of a liquor license for a business. We perform fire safety inspections at daycares. We perform CPR on patrons at a casino. We have 13 gaming properties across the state. Part of DPS is the Missouri Gaming Commission. And on those properties are troopers of the Missouri State Highway Patrol. And their presence on there is to make sure that the gaming regulations are followed while those boats are in operation. So we also have a component that would respond to suspicious packages to state office buildings. That would be the Capitol Police. And we have one of the largest components is the Missouri National Guard. And of course you all are well aware of their involvement in the state as well as worldwide at times. And then we also have the Missouri Veterans Commission. They are responsible for the 7 veterans homes throughout the state. And so at any given time, we could be interacting with a veteran in one capacity or another. I've seen some of you at the returns for the Central Missouri Honor Flight. That is something I try to do on a regular basis. I got involved when I was with the patrol, but I have continued that. And I just got to tell you that as I attended more and more of those returns, I was doing it for the veterans, but I also received a lot out of that too. My appreciation for veterans goes back to my upbringing, but it is one of those things that I don't think we can do enough of, and that is to say thank you to those who have served, but also to appreciate the humor and to appreciate their stories. As the colonel, I was escorting a gentleman off of the buses. We escort them from the buses when they arrive at the hotel. Down the runway, they're introduced, and then they go on into the hotel to reunite with their family or friends. And so I usually try to figure out if they're from the Korean War era, Vietnam, World War II, or whatever the case may be. And I was kind of sizing up this guy. He was very nimble on his feet. And he looked kind of young. And I said, you must be of the Korean War era. And he said, oh, no, hon. He said, I'm from World War II. And I said, oh, okay, well, how old are you? He said, I'm 92. And I'm like, wow. I said, you're in really good shape. And he's like, yeah, I do 100 push-ups every morning. And so that was one of the things that he had learned from his military career. And so we learned a little bit more about each other. And I walk in and I said, well, do you have family that's here to meet you? And he said, no, but my girlfriend is. So you got to appreciate the humor that they bring with them too, as well as their stories. So I kind of recapped some of those, but I'll list them if you were keeping track. There's a lot of divisions in DPS, and there's a lot of different topics that we cover. So we have the Highway Patrol, State Emergency Management Agency, Alcohol Tobacco Control, make sure I don't forget anybody, Division of Fire Safety, the DPS Director's Office, and I'll get into what they do here in just a minute, the Missouri Gaming Commission, Capitol Police, and the Missouri Veterans Commission, and the Missouri National Guard. So the Director's Office, I'm thinking, okay, the Director's Office, how many employees would you think a Director's Office would have? I had been around a director before. As the Colonel, I didn't realize the depth and the breadth of all of DPS. But the DPS Director's Office is responsible for many grants to many different agencies, whether it's shelters for battered women, whether it's a cybercrime task force, whether it's a drug task force. We have involvement in many different grants, as well as the administration of the state Crime Victims Assistance Program. So we're interacting with people on a regular basis, and I'm very happy to serve as the director. I did not seek this job. I'm very honest and open about that. I was the colonel of the Highway Patrol. Been on the patrol for 33 years, and I was approached by the governor, and he said, I'd be personally grateful if you would consider this. Well, I don't know, how many of you met Governor Parson? Yes, he's a very personable person, very genuine, and I couldn't figure out how to tell him no. So I said yes, and that's where I am today. So, but we have a lot going on in DPS, as I mentioned, but some of the things that I want to touch on is what's going on in state government as well. And that is, many times in years past, and I'm not here to bash anyone, but in years past, we were very territorial in our departments, and we took extreme ownership into our projects. And I will tell you now that there's more cohesion among the state departments than I've ever seen before. There's more cohesion in DPS than I've ever seen before. We kind of are structured and we have our silos, but because of what's going on with Governor Parson's leadership at the state level, we are sharing things and resources and talents that we've never shared before. Just an example, in the patrol has 2,500 employees. They have a radio shop in which they install hundreds of radios across the state for patrol cars. Well, fire safety doesn't have as big of staff. Fire safety was utilizing a vendor, and it would seem to be taking a lot longer, and I'm like, why? Could the patrol not do that for you? You have 4 cars. And yes, that's what we're doing. So we're making sure that we're sharing training, we're sharing resources, and we're sharing equipment like we haven't ever before. In the state, SEMA, I've mentioned that, State Emergency Management Agency. They've been very busy in the last 2 weeks. They're busy all the time in preparation for disasters, but in the last 2 weeks in response to the flooding that we've seen across our state. But one of the things that we have done recently is embed someone from the National Weather Service a meteorologist in the State Emergency Operations Center, so that when we're activated, we have a higher confidence level of the forecast that we're seeing. We have access quicker to the resources that a meteorologist brings with them. And so whenever we were briefing Governor Parson on the impending flood, the meteorologist was sitting right there with us and was able to answer the questions that the governor had. That is but one example. Another example, in the last 2 weeks, we've had embedded with us a representative from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and was able to provide us up-to-date, accurate information on what the circumstances that they were seeing. Also, to provide the state with greater assistance quicker in sandbag operations and things like that, and resources that we would need. Another example of the cooperation that is going on at state government was, we had several requests for sandbaggers. We had many areas who had volunteers that were doing that, and we applaud the volunteers for that. But we had some areas that said, I think we need the Guard. And I'm not opposed to calling out the Guard or activating the Guard, but I am trying to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And so, well, what do you need? We'll ask more questions about that. But you know what we did? We called the Department of Corrections and said, do you have some folks who could assist with sandbagging? And they were able to supply and meet the needs for the sandbagging operations with inmate offender labor. And so we're trying to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars and trying to leverage all of the resources of state government so that we're able to respond to the needs of Missourians with the lowest cost option. Also going on in state government, of course, some of you may know him. I think he's from Columbia originally. Greg Robb. Anybody in here know him? Greg Robb started with the state in January. He is the first ever Director of Operational Excellence for the state of Missouri. And he is causing us to look at our processes and to try and squeeze out the pennies, try and squeeze out the seconds, so that we're more efficient in the way we're operating. Greg Robb is working closely with the Chief Operating Officer, Drew Wordman. The state had never had a Chief Operating Officer until he was hired. And he's also applying that pressure to change state government for the better. And I say applying pressure. Pressure is a good thing, because without it, sometimes we don't change. I know if you've ever had a health event and your doctor says, you got to stop doing what you're doing, or you must start doing this, there's some pressure that came with that. And so because of that, you change maybe your eating habits or maybe your exercise habits. That's the same pressure I'm talking about that Drew Erdman is applying to state government. It's in a positive way, applying pressure to become better. Michael Jordan, how many basketball fans in here? Michael Jordan, one of his quotes, you probably know it. Nobody ever fails, but you fail to try. And so that's what we're try. Don't be afraid of trying something different. And that is the message in state government now. So I'm very happy to be a part of it. We are training the state workforce, probably different than we've ever done before. And I know that's, yeah, right, you're the former colonel, you have a lot of training in the patrol, and we do. But in the rest of state government, I didn't realize that training wasn't as important as maybe it should have been. How do you get better? You train. And so we are now dedicating at least 5% of the time on the IT side of things in OA, Office of Administration, for training so they can get better with the IT projects, so it delivers greater value to the state. I know that many of you in here could probably recite what the governor's top 2 priorities are. What are they? And workforce development. That's exactly right. And that's the message I'm here to say, is it's infrastructure and workforce development, both in state government and in private industry. So you all know, many of you are business leaders in here, you know that to hire people, you have to have educated people and they have to be trained in the areas where the jobs are. And that is one of his focuses. So Fast Track, how many of you are familiar with Fast Track? Whether you agree or disagree with the concept or the way it's designed, I believe it is going to make us better as a state. It's making its way through the legislature right now to provide assistance to those 25 and older for degree positions. So another one of Governor Parsons' priorities is the restructuring of state government. Higher ed and economic development are seeing a transformation. They are being changed so that we hope that the Department of Economic Development is more nimble now. Rob Dixon, how many of you were Dr. Rob? Rob will tell you, we weren't very good as a state in economic development. And he said we had so many priorities, we couldn't really focus. And so, paring down economic development, putting higher ed a little bit bigger, so that they will be solely focused on workforce development. So it is an exciting time. I'm happy to be a part of this administration. There's a lot going on in state government. I know that there's a lot that's touching each and every one of you. I have some handouts over here. They come, they're very DPS centered, but I'm happy to provide them. One is storm aware. So I know we have rain right now, but that could easily change. And certainly hail and tornadoes are in our usually springtime forecast in Missouri. The other two handouts I have is one on the Crime Victims Compensation Program, and the other one is on the Crime Victims' Rights Week ceremony, and I'll go ahead and pass those around. But the Crime Victims Compensation Program has undergone a transformation as well. It was changed to make it easier and quicker for crime victims to apply for assistance from the state of Missouri. Now, I must say, crime victims compensation is the payer of last resort, so you must have exhausted many of those other avenues first in order to receive or to qualify for the benefits. We have a staff of about 20 people, and that's what they do every day is speak with crime victims across the state of Missouri, trying to get them assistance. That is a program we're very proud of, and we take very serious the service that we're able to provide. So, with that, I will answer any questions you might have. I might tell you I don't know, but I would be happy to try and get the answer for you. I know that this is supposed to go till 12:30, or I'm not sure, but I'd be happy to take any questions. I talk faster than my speechwriter writes, so. Yes?
You mentioned all the variety of agencies that report up to you. How do you communicate with them? Do you have a staff meeting once a month with the leaders of each of those agencies, or how does that work?
That's a good question. One of the leadership development initiatives in the state is called the Missouri Way. And it's 3 days of intense indoctrination into leadership and how to communicate with people like that. One of my takeaways from the Missouri Way is you can never over-communicate. So we communicate by email, phone call, and we have monthly meetings with those. Then, also, how many of you heard of Engage? Missouri has undergone some performance management changes, and leaders are required, supervisors are required to engage with their individual subordinates once a month. And through those engage meetings, we try to cover a lot of the ground that you would normally see. But, you know, I had a similar situation with the patrol. As the superintendent, I had 6 majors and a lieutenant colonel. And underneath that was 9 troops and 22 divisions spread across the state. So you have to be very thoughtful and intentional in how you communicate with people doing diverse jobs. But good question.
Okay. Maybe 2 comments and a quick question. That first of all, you didn't mention post. I won't tell Jeremy if you don't. Second, I was just talking to some of our Columbia police officers 2 days ago about MyAC.
Okay.
And that's a tremendous resource that doesn't cost anything to our department, and they really appreciate it. My question really drills down. I was talking to a trooper recently who we were comparing notes. Our new, now interim police chief, Jeff Jones, has expanded the officer's authority to engage in a pursuit and put it back where he sort of thinks it should be. And the trooper I talked to said, I feel like the patrol is going the other way and restricting our ability to engage in pursuits. And I know the two sides of that are, you know, people say, oh, you let him get away, or people say, you engage in a pursuit and put everybody in danger.
Let me speak to all three of those topics. One is POST, it's the Peace Officer Standards and Training. That, it's a program that is out of the director's office in which we license peace officers for the state of Missouri. We also track their continuing education and make sure that they're up to date with that. And we also take complaints on peace officers and investigate those through. So that's what POST does. The other one is the MIAC, the Missouri Information and Analysis Center. That is a part of the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and it's the State Fusion Center. There, in the state of Missouri, there are 3 fusion centers. One in St. Louis, one in Kansas City, and one in Jefferson City. And that brings together information for law enforcement or even private industry. We receive a lot of information from many different people. You've familiar with the See Something, Say Something campaign? That is also part of the MIAC. It originated after 9/11, in which there were connections not made with information that people had. And so the MIAC brings all that together. We will do workups for officers. We will do a lot of open source data, and then we'll dig deeper if we need to. But how many of you Googled your name recently? Yeah. Well, Google it and see what you get. But that's what the MIAC is doing. Sometimes you have to sort through it. We have analysts there that do sort through the information to make sure this is the same person. They do a lot of deconfliction as well at the MIAC, so thank you for mentioning that.
It's a great service for our
Pursuit.
officers. Yeah,
Yes.
I love it.
It's great for law enforcement statewide. Pursuits. One of the most high liability areas law enforcement deals with. The second one is firearms. Pursuits. From an administrator's perspective, it's different than a trooper perspective, kind of like accreditation. But you have to look at, are you making the public more safe by engaging in this pursuit or less safe? In other words, has the driving behaviors changed after this pursuit was initiated? Or was the guy all over the road and endangering people anyway? And so it's a balance. And we have an uninvolved officer supervise our pursuits from the radio room. They can tell how fast they're going. The trooper or the officer is required to provide all the conditions that they're seeing. And many times, the adrenaline will impact the judgment of the officer. But when we have a separate person, they will terminate it. And that's what the officer has to do. And not just turn off your lights and keep following them. You have to stop, turn off your lights, and disengage. Does that mean our efforts to apprehend the person have ended? Not at all. The patrol has, somebody I was mentioning in here, long line helicopter rescue capabilities, but in that helicopter we also have augmented reality mapping system. So you've probably seen it and you didn't realize it, but our helicopter will work traffic, but that helicopter is able to follow the pursuits and the ground cars can disengage. The helicopter can then direct them to where those vehicles ended up. And so we offer that for law enforcement as well. It depends on the weather, obviously. Some days you can't fly, but in many cases we've had very good success with that helicopter. We run special operations in different parts of the state. A lot of the sport bikes that you see that are cutting in and out of traffic, we will do a special operation, Kansas City, Springfield, and in many cases those are stolen sport bikes, and we're able to apprehend those. But we're also able to, I think, have an impact on public safety in apprehending those people who are willing to do that. So, good question, Dale.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
One of the top priorities that has remained the top priorities for businesses and local communities have been public safety and law enforcement in general. From, your perspective as a director of the state department that handles public safety as a whole, what do you think the business communities across the state can do to better work with both their local law enforcement and perhaps the highway patrol in kind of a broad effort of just being a team?
Good question. One of the greatest, you guys are gonna love this, one of the greatest, it's insightful, you're gonna leave here thinking, I learned something today. One of the greatest dangers to public safety is right here. And so, here's what I would ask, is what are your policies as a business owner for your employees to operate a vehicle? Is it no texting while driving? Is it hands-free? What is that? Because you see it all the time. You see it at stoplights. You see it on the interstate where people are maybe driving with their leg and they're reading a book or whatever it is they're doing on their phone. But I believe you can look at your policies internally and think, how are my policies and the compliance of those policies with my employees impacting overall public safety? The other thing is, what are you doing in your business to secure your technology? Cybersecurity is one of the biggest things. I was at a presentation this morning, and monthly the state of Missouri's network is attacked over 1.5 million times. Those attacks are coming from many different directions, I know, and the patrol has a separate network, similar situation. And so, Matt Pritchard's in here, he knows AT&T. What are you guys doing for cybersecurity? A ton.
I just literally did a training class yesterday on social engineering and how to steal people's identities. I mean, it's phenomenal, this conversations you can have to get us tons of information.
Yes, and so it's things like that that maybe you don't think about, but you have a lot of proprietary, if not closed information as a business owner that you have. I know Central Bank,
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys are doing something in cybersecurity because that's where we bank in Jeff City. So, but it's things like that you need to think about on how you contribute to public safety. So, what about your buildings, your facilities, the environmental designs? How are you keeping your secure, your location secure and safe? You owe it to your employees. I know that we have a lot of news topics across the nation about intruder training or shootings at work locations. And so if you are not training or raising the awareness level of your employees about those situations, I would recommend that you do that. And public safety provides people to provide that training to you. So it takes a phone call and some scheduling. So.
Been a lot of discussion about arming educators. Share your thoughts on that.
My husband, he's retired, teacher of 31 years, taught industrial arts at Blair Oaks. And so my personal opinion is there are people who are in education to educate, and there are people in public safety who that's their job. Let me put it to you a different way. When we have officer-involved shootings, we find that there are low hit rates, about 40%. Officers are required to qualify yearly, peace officer standards and training, qualify yearly. 70% is passing for qualifications. And so when you put a time on an officer, there's a little bit of stress on them. But whenever they get into a critical incident, there's a whole lot of stress on them. And their accuracy rate is 40%. And that is carrying a gun every day that they work, shooting sometimes often. And so now, what would your expectation be of that teacher? For their accuracy rate, their annual qualification? I don't know. And teachers have a lot of challenges in their classroom. My husband still substitute teaches. His career was high school. He did kindergarten the other day. Well, guess what? He left his phone on the desk. And guess what one of those little kindergartners was doing? Hey, coach, nice phone. Is this your wife? It's like, oh my gosh, Tim. And so, it was. Yeah, it was good to know.
I'm glad it was secure, I'm glad it was secure too.
Yeah, it was secure. So, but to my point is, there's a lot of stuff going on in the classroom. And how many of you have kids? They're predictable? No. And are they always in the same place where they tell you they're going to be? No. And so there's a lot of challenges in a classroom. And my opinion is how to address the safety first, and then the arming might be a component of that. I do sit on the governor's task force on school safety. We're looking at how schools are configured, what are their safety plans, how do they train with them. And this topic has come up, and I will tell you it's as clear as this line right here. There's some on this side of the issue and some on this side of the issue. And the schools will tell you our problems are local and our solutions are local. So what might work for Columbia may not work for a rural area school. So, did I answer your question, or did I dance around it?
No. You answered it very well, thank you.
Yeah, so think about the stress that a police officer is under and the training that they endure, and how sometimes in a critical incident they do not hit what they're shooting at. And then translate that into what you would do in a classroom. So,
Any other questions?
Before Joe shuts us off, the Columbia Police,
Dale, you can never be shut off.
We all know that.
2 years ago, the Columbia Police Officers Association started an annual handgun competition. So, and you said we can invite you to things. We'd like you to come this year and show our officers how it's done.
Oh, okay, all right. We'll get a conversation on the side. Sure.
So, as you've been in the job for a little while now, and you see all the different departments, are you seeing any kind of areas where you can merge departments or merge different divisions within departments? And even, the second part of this question is using technology, the latest and greatest technology like drones or anything like that as far as enforcement or?
Let me answer the last part first. So as the colonel, I had been to an event in Kansas City where they were providing overwatch at this event with drones. And I was very interested in that, and I came back and I said, how can we use drones to map our crash scenes quicker and safer? And so our crash teams, we have 4 major crash teams across the state, and they respond to fatalities or major crashes where there's a lot of people injured, like we saw in, in February. And so they now have drones that they're able to map a scene. You guys ready for this? Before, it takes 2 people to map a scene 44 minutes. That same scene with a drone, 9 minutes.
Wow.
What does that equate to for you as business owners if you have commerce going across the interstate and we can clear that up quicker? What does it equate to in safety for the first responders who are there, and then also for anybody in that backup? And secondary backups are very dangerous, or secondary crashes are dangerous and likely in the backup. And so we see that as a good use of funds to make people safer and more efficient. Now, the first part of your question is, yes. Now, and why I say that, yes, I will give you an example. Crime victims compensation. I took a call from a lady the other day, and she said, Director, she said, I am confused. And I said, well, how can I help you? She said, when I get on your site, I click on crime victims compensation, and I see 2 areas that I can go to. And then when I click on the rules, I go to this place called DOLR, Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. And when I click on corrections website, I see that there's a victim advocacy here. And when I go to the courts, there's victim advocates that work for the courts. And when I go to the prosecutors, there are victim advocates that work for the prosecutors. And My sheriff and my police department both have victim advocates. She said, how can this be? And so, yes, we see it. We are working in the direction to streamline a lot of that. Yep. And so, good point though. Input comes from many different sources, and we welcome public input on, hey, I made this observation and I wondered if you could do it this way and accomplish the same thing quicker, faster, safer, all of that. So, yes, we seek public input too. So, with that, Dale, I think that was the last question.
You're done.
Thank you.
Director Carson, thank you.
Thank you.